umamav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yimeru. Amen.
Amen. Please be seated. Thank you, God. Good Shabbos, everybody. It's lovely to see you all here. It's hot. This week's Torah reading, Parshat Chayei Sarah, the life of Sarah, starts not with the life of Sarah, but rather with the death and the burial of Sarah. This has been a topic of discussion and commentators for thousands of years. It's not something that I want to get into now. However, tomorrow night, our non-Jewish neighbors will be marking a holiday connected to death, Halloween, or more formally known as All Hallows Eve or All Saints Eve, a time when Christians remember their dead, especially including saints. That's where we get the name from, Hallows, okay? Halloween, Hallows. Many Jewish families struggle with what to do on December the 31st. Over the years, I've had many calls around this time from particularly younger families who want to know what they should do. Do we let our children dress up in costumes and go out trick-or-treating? Or do we forbid it on the grounds that it is a Christian holiday? We have our own dress-up holiday, namely Purim. Purim is another advantage over Halloween. Instead of going around taking things from people, we go around giving things to people. Mishloach manot, ish l're'ehu. Now, naturally, in the Jewish world, there are multiple opinions. You know the old saying, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. It's exactly the same here. So let's start with a little bit of background about the holiday itself. And just like in the Talmud, they start a discussion of Hanukkah. It starts off, my Hanukkah. What is Hanukkah? Not that the rabbis didn't know what Hanukkah was. They knew what it was. But it was a question they asked because they knew they were going to have to rebrand it. And so we start off today, my Halloween. What is Halloween? Now, many scholars believe that the origins of Halloween were in a Celtic pagan harvest festival, which became a Gaelic festival known as Samhain. The actual day of Samhain is November 1, but the Celtic day begins and ends with sunset, just like the Jewish day, which means that their celebration starts the night before, on October the 31st. Now, references to Samhain can be found in the earliest Irish literature going back 1,200 years. The literature says that Samhain was marked with gatherings, with feasts, and ancient burial mounds, visitations, considered portals to the other world. They would be opened up. Can you imagine opening up those portals? The early Christian church held feasts commemorating martyrs around the time of Easter and Pentecost, the Christian equivalent of Shavuot. And in the 9th century, churches in the British Isles began commemorating All Saints on November the 1st, the same day as Samhain. It was Pope Gregory the IV who extended this to the entire Western Catholic Church later in the 9th century. The Catholic Church has special prayers that are offered on Halloween. And traditionally, it was a meat-free day. One of the popular dishes that they would serve, believe it or not, is what we call latkes. It was potato pancakes mixed with onions. The Jewish objection to commemorating Halloween is mostly based on a verse that's found in the book of Vayikra, in the book of Leviticus chapter 18, which says, "You shall not copy the practices of the land of Egypt where you dwelt, or of the land of Canaan to which I am taking you, and nor shall you follow their laws. In other words, they have their ways, we have our ways, and we shouldn't copy our neighbors. So if we let our kids celebrate Halloween, aren't we copying our neighbors? But what exactly does that verse prohibit? Jews have always borrowed some things from our neighbors. The idea of having the bima, for instance, in the front of the sanctuary comes from the 18th century German churches, particularly the Protestant churches. And one of the most traditional melodies for Enkel Eloheinu, not one that we sing here, one that we're going to sing today anyway, comes from a German beer drinking song. Enkel Eloheinu, Enkel Eloheinu. That's where it comes from. The standard fancy clothes of the Haredim, see them walking around in Outremer, they were what Polish nobility wore in the 19th century. The medieval Talmud commentary, Tosafot, says that there are two different types of customs prohibited by the verse in Leviticus. One is idolatrous customs, and the other is foolish customs, even if they're not idolatrous. But Rabbeinu Nissim and the Maharik disagreed. And they said it was only idolatrous customs that were forbidden, not foolish ones. And this is what became the accepted opinion. So if our neighbors have a foolish custom and we decide to copy it, so what? The Ramah, who is a commentator on the Shulchan Aruch, said that the requirement to be distinct from the Gentiles only applies to things that the non-Jews do for the sake of licentiousness, which we seem as things tainted by idol worship. There are also those who argue that we can't engage in trick-or-treating because it's prohibited under Jewish law in the Shulchan Aruch. How would it be prohibited? In one place in the Shulchan Aruch, we are told that it is forbidden to give non-Jews gifts on their religious holidays. And in another place, we're clearly forbidden to, God forbid, damage someone's property. And if we do damage somebody's property, we have to pay the full amount of the damage. Now, I'm sure you'll agree with me that we can all agree that any tricks shouldn't damage property. But the argument over wearing costumes or giving or collecting candy comes down to whether Halloween is a religious holiday or not. Whether it's pagan or Christian doesn't really matter. We don't celebrate the Christians' Easter because they are clearly Christian holidays, stooped in religious belief. Now, if we go back to one of the great decisors, rabbinic decisors of the 20th century, that would be Reb Moshe Feinstein, Zecher Tzaddik Livracha, who was one of the leading American Orthodox rabbis. He had this to say about following non-Jewish customs, and I'm going to read it to you. He says, "It is obvious in my opinion that even in a case where something would be considered a prohibited Gentile custom, if many people do it for the reasons unrelated to their religion or law, but rather because it is pleasurable for them, there is no prohibition of imitating Gentile customs. And so too it is obvious that if Gentiles were to make a religious law to eat a particular item that is good to eat, halakha would not prohibit eating that same item, providing it was kosher, of course. And so too, any item of pleasure in the world cannot be prohibited merely because Gentiles do so out of religious observance." So the important point with Halloween is whether the customs have become unrelated to religion and simply something that's pleasurable that non-Jews do. Now, if you ask, you can try this, you can ask any of your Christian friends about Samhain. It's a pretty good bet that almost all of them will respond with probably a blank look, wondering what the heck you're talking about. They will have no idea. And then from this, I think that we can conclude that the pagan roots of Halloween have been long ago lost and forgotten, at least for most of us anyway. And many of our own religious holidays may have pagan roots that no one remembers as well. I mean, I could quote you some, but I don't want to upset people here by not being able to go into it in too great a detail today, but certainly some of our religious practices have pagan roots in them. Another good test of whether something is a religious holiday is whether people go to church. Now, many people say that Christians have become that Christmas has become a secular holiday. But Christmas and Easter are like the high holidays for Jews. It's like the Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur for Jews. Churches are overflowing with the twice-a-year Christians. It's pretty clear that Christmas is still very much alive as a Christian holiday. So how many of your Christian friends will mark Halloween by going to church tomorrow night? Tonight or tomorrow night? Tomorrow night. I'd be willing to bet the answer is very few, if any. You know, one of the best signs that the way most people celebrate Halloween has become removed from its Christian roots is the fact that there are Christians who are opposed to many of the customs. Some Christians say it either celebrates or actually trivializes paganism, that it trivializes the occult, and other phenomena not in line with Christian beliefs. Father Gabriel Amorth, who is an exorcist in Rome, has said, if English and American children like to dress up as witches and devils on one night of the year, that's not a problem. If it's just a game, there is no harm in that at all. So we as Jews can have the same attitude. If it's just a game and it's just for enjoyment, there is no harm in it. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not actively encouraging celebrating Halloween. If you feel it's going to strengthen your children's Jewish identity to stay home, perhaps being good neighbors by handing out candy to children passing by, that's certainly fine. We do, in fact, have our own awesome holiday where we dress up in costumes and we give out things. That's in the spring. But if you want your kids to celebrate Halloween the same way that other Canadian children celebrate Halloween, you don't need to worry. You are not violating any Jewish law, and you don't need to worry that you are allowing some form of terrible violation of Judaism. Halloween as celebrated today is no longer a pagan holiday. It's no longer even a Christian holiday. It is nothing more than a secular custom of English-speaking nations to have fun. So as far as I'm concerned, if you're a child or an adult and you want to go out and celebrate Gay Gesundheit, go do it. Shabbat Shalom. At this time, I'm going to call forward Elise to